Korean Mafia boss catches black employee in the act and can't believe what he sees. Welcome back to the channel, family. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and smash the like. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment telling me what state you're watching from. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in. Now let's get into the story. Jin-Ho Kang never thought that coming home 3 hours early from his office that Thursday would shatter everything he believed about loyalty, trust, and the people around him. The sound drifting from his daughter Soo-min's bedroom made him freeze in the marble hallway of his Gangnam penthouse. His jaw tightened. It was laughter, pure, unrestrained laughter from a 6-year-old girl who hadn't smiled in almost a year. Soo-min had been born with a mild form of spina bifida, a condition that affected her lower body strength and coordination. Since her diagnosis, Jin-Ho had buried himself deeper into the operations of his family's empire, a sprawling network of legitimate businesses that served as the polished face of one of Seoul's most powerful organized crime syndicates. Running from the agony of watching his only child struggle against obstacles that no amount of money or influence could eliminate became his specialty. The shame consumed him in silence, transforming him into an even colder, more ruthless man. Stepping closer to the half-open door, Jin-Ho peered through the gap and felt his blood turn to ice. There was Grace, the Nigerian housekeeper he had hired 8 months ago through an agency, kneeling on the wooden floor beside Soo-min. But that wasn't what made his stomach drop. It was what she was doing. Grace was carefully supporting the little girl's legs, guiding them through movements that looked exactly like professional physical therapy. Soo-min giggled as Grace hummed a gentle African melody, encouraging her to engage the muscles on her own. The black woman's hands, roughened from years of domestic labor, manipulated the child's limbs with a precision and gentleness that Jin-Ho had never witnessed, not even from the most prestigious rehabilitation specialists money could buy. "Come on, little warrior," Grace whispered warmly. "You can push this leg up by yourself. Remember what we practiced yesterday? You are stronger than you know." Soo-min concentrated hard, her small face scrunched with effort, and managed to lift her leg several centimeters off the mat. Her eyes exploded with pride as Grace clapped enthusiastically. "Yes, you see, every day you grow mightier." Jin-Ho felt a storm of emotions crash through him. Fury at discovering that a mere housekeeper had been interfering with his daughter's medical care without authorization. Confusion at realizing that Soo-min was showing more improvement in these few minutes than she had in months of conventional therapy. And a sharp sting of something he couldn't name. Perhaps jealousy of the effortless bond Grace had built with his child. But there was something else that disturbed him even more. Grace spoke to Soo-min using medical terminology naturally, as if she possessed specialized training. How could a simple cleaning woman know about specific muscle groups, pressure points, and mobilization techniques? This mystery gnawed at him. Jin-Ho's wife, Hye-jin, appeared in the corridor holding a cup of barley tea. She looked surprised to see her husband home so early, but her expression softened when she heard the laughter echoing from the bedroom. "Grace has something special with Soo-min," she whispered, approaching. "Since she started caring for her, our daughter has been showing progress we've never seen before." Jin-Ho turned sharply toward Hye-jin, his eyes blazing. "You knew about this? You knew she was doing this?" He gestured toward the bedroom, his voice thick with tension he couldn't fully decode. Hye-jin lowered her gaze, clearly uncomfortable. "I noticed some things, yes, but Jin-Ho, look at how happy Soo-min is. It's been so long since she laughed like that." Her words struck him like a fist to the chest. When was the last time he had truly paid attention to Soo-min's development? When was the last time he had gotten down on the floor to play with his own daughter? The guilt that already haunted him intensified, now tangled with anger directed at Grace and at himself. At that moment, Grace helped Soo-min sit up on a cushion, and the girl hugged her spontaneously. "Thank you, Auntie Grace. Tomorrow I'm going to lift both legs together. Just watch." The scene struck a chord deep in Jin-Ho's hardened heart. For years he had desperately searched for something that would restore hope and joy to Soo-min's life. And here it was, happening right under his roof, at the hands of someone he had dismissed as nothing more than hired help. Now Jin-Ho would have to decide what to do with this unsettling discovery, one that threatened to reshape everything about his family. The following morning, Jin-Ho couldn't focus on a single meeting. His mind kept circling back to what he had witnessed in Soo-min's room. He decided to leave the office early again, this time determined to confront Grace directly. He needed answers about what was happening in his own home. When he arrived, he found Grace in the kitchen preparing Soo-min's afternoon snack. She greeted him with a polite bow, but Jin-Ho noticed a flicker of anxiety in her dark eyes. She knew she had been caught. "Grace, I need to speak with you." Jinho said, fighting to keep his voice controlled. It's about what I saw yesterday in Sumin's room. Grace stiffened, her hands pausing mid-motion as she sliced fruit. Mr. Kang, I can explain. Explain what? That you've been playing doctor with my daughter without my permission? Jinho's voice came out sharper than he intended. You're not qualified for that. You're just a housekeeper. The words sliced through the air like blades. Grace lowered her eyes, her hands trembling slightly. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to overstep. But there was something in Grace's demeanor that intrigued Jinho. Despite her apparent submission, he sensed a quiet determination in her posture, as if she was guarding an important secret, something that could completely change the situation if revealed. Where did you learn those techniques? Jinho pressed. Where does a cleaning woman learn about physical therapy? Grace hesitated for a long moment, as if wrestling internally between revealing the truth or remaining silent. Finally, she spoke softly. My younger brother, sir. He was born with similar challenges to Sumin's. I took care of him for 14 years back in Lagos. I learned by watching therapists, reading medical textbooks at community libraries, studying videos online. My family had no money for expensive treatments, so I became his therapist. Grace lifted her gaze, and for the first time, Jinho saw a burning flame of conviction in her eyes. My brother Emeka walks today, sir. He runs. He plays football. The doctors in Nigeria said he would never stand on his own 2 feet. The revelation struck Jinho like lightning. His anger began to mix with something more complicated, reluctant respect, and also a stab of shame. This woman had achieved through love and persistence what he, with all his wealth and connections, had failed to provide for his own daughter. You had no right to make decisions about my daughter's care without consulting me, Jinho said, but his voice had lost some of its initial edge. You're right, sir. Grace agreed, lowering her eyes again. But Sumin was so sad, so discouraged. I only wanted to help. At that moment, Sumin appeared in the kitchen, walking with her small crutches but wearing a radiant smile. Appa, you came home early again. She looked at Grace. Auntie Grace, can I show Appa what I learned yesterday? Jinho studied his daughter, noticing something he had missed before. Sumin stood visibly straighter, her posture more confident. There was a spark in her eyes that Jinho hadn't seen in far too long. Sumin, go back to your room. The adults are talking, Jinho said, more from instinct than intention. Sumin's smile instantly vanished. Grace knelt to the girl's level. How about you wait for me in the living room, little warrior? I'll teach you a new exercise in a few minutes. After Sumin left, Grace turned back to Jinho with renewed resolve. Mr. Kang, I know you see me as just a housekeeper, and perhaps that's all I am to you. But your daughter is improving, and you know it. Improving. Jinho laughed bitterly. You've seen her for a few minutes. I see her every day, Grace interrupted, her voice gaining strength. For 8 months. I see her crying when she thinks no one is watching. I see her struggling not to disappoint the expensive specialists you hire. I see a brilliant, brave little girl who only needs someone who truly believes in her. Grace's words echoed in Jinho's chest like a silent accusation. When was the last time he had truly looked at Sumin, not just at her limitations, but at her possibilities? My methods may not be as scientific as the professionals, Grace continued, but they're done with genuine love, and sometimes that makes all the difference. Jinho felt a turbulent mix of emotions. On one hand, his wounded pride resisted the idea that a housekeeper could accomplish what expensive specialists could not. On the other hand, he couldn't deny the results he was seeing in Sumin, but there was still another mystery that intrigued him. How did Grace maintain such dedication after working all day taking care of the house? What deep motivation drove her to invest so much time and energy in her employer's child? In the following days, Jinho began to observe Grace differently, no longer as a simple employee, but as an enigma that needed to be solved. He discreetly had additional security cameras installed throughout the penthouse, officially to increase protection, but in reality to monitor Grace's activities with Sumin. What he discovered through the recordings left him deeply unsettled, though not in the way he expected. Grace arrived an hour early every day without being paid for the extra time. She stayed past her official hours, helping Sumin with motor coordination exercises. On weekends, when she should have been resting, she voluntarily appeared to continue the improvised therapy sessions. Jinho discovered that Grace had transformed Sumin's room into a kind of home rehabilitation clinic. She used ordinary household objects in creative ways. Cushions became obstacles for balance exercises. Resistance bands meant for packaging turned into muscle-strengthening equipment. Even plastic bottles filled with rice served as weights for therapy. But there was something more fascinating. Grace kept a detailed notebook recording Sumin's progress, which techniques worked best, the girl's emotional responses, daily observations. It was documentation more thorough and careful than any medical report Jin-ho had ever received from professional therapists. One afternoon, Jin-ho decided to follow Grace after her shift ended. He wanted to understand where all that inexplicable dedication came from. Grace took the subway to Itaewon, then walked to a modest apartment building in a neighborhood populated largely by foreign workers. She entered a small unit on the third floor. Jin-ho waited on the street for almost 2 hours until he saw her emerge, accompanied by a young black man who appeared to be around 17 years old. The teenager walked with a slight limp, but his movements were fluid and confident. It was Emeka, the brother Grace had mentioned. Together they walked to a nearby park where Emeka joined a pickup football game with other young men. Watching from a distance, Jin-ho was stunned by the teenager's athletic ability. Emeka didn't just participate, he dominated, dribbling past opponents and scoring goals with an agility that defied any previous physical limitation. He was living proof of the effectiveness of Grace's unconventional methods. Jin-ho cautiously approached the field. Grace was sitting on a bench watching her brother play, a proud smile on her face. When she noticed her employer's presence, she became visibly tense. "Mr. Kang, what are you doing here?" "Following you," Jin-ho replied with brutal honesty. "I wanted to understand why you care so much about Soo-min." Grace lowered her eyes, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "I don't know what you want me to say. The truth. Why would a housekeeper dedicate so much time and energy to her employer's daughter? What's your interest in this?" Grace remained silent for a long moment, watching Emeka score another goal. Finally, she sighed deeply. "My brother isn't just my responsibility, Mr. Kang. He is my inspiration. When he was small and the doctors in Lagos said Emeka would never walk normally, I promised myself I would prove them wrong." "And you did?" "Yes, but it wasn't only because of the physical exercises. It was because I never stopped believing in him. I never let him see himself as limited or different." Grace paused, carefully choosing her words. "And when I see Soo-min, I see a girl with the same potential Emeka had, but surrounded by adults who have already given up on her." The words hit Jin-ho like a slap across the face. "You're accusing me of giving up on my own daughter?" "I'm not accusing anyone, sir. I'm only saying that Soo-min needs someone who believes in the impossible." At that moment, Emeka jogged over, sweating from the game. "Grace, who is this man?" "He's my employer, Emeka. Mr. Jin-ho Kang." Emeka extended his hand politely. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Kang. Grace talks about her work often." Jin-ho shook the young man's hand, noticing the firmness of his grip and the confidence in his gaze. "Grace told me about you. It's impressive to watch you play. Grace taught me that limitation exists only in the mind." Emeka smiled. "She always said that if I truly wanted something, I would find a way to make it happen." Jin-ho looked at Grace with a new expression, a mixture of admiration and shame. He began to understand that he had misjudged not only her abilities, but also her motivations. Grace wasn't trying to impress anyone or gain anything in return. She simply saw in Soo-min an opportunity to replicate the miracle she had achieved with her own brother. But there was still another mystery that intrigued him. During his observations, Jin-ho had noticed that Grace sometimes left the apartment late at night carrying a worn duffel bag. Where she went on those occasions, and what she carried in that bag, remained an enigma that increasingly fueled his curiosity. Quick reminder, family, if you're enjoying this story, take a second to hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. It really helps the channel grow. Now let's continue. The following week, Jin-ho decided to follow Grace during one of her mysterious nighttime outings. It was nearly 11 o'clock when she left the building with her usual bag. Jin-ho trailed her discreetly to a community center in a working-class district near Dongdaemun. The sign at the entrance was faded, Sarang Community Rehabilitation Center. Through the window, Jin-ho saw something that left him completely speechless. Grace stood at the center of an improvised room, surrounded by about a dozen children with various physical disabilities. She had transformed that simple space into a volunteer therapy clinic, using the same creative methods she applied with Soo-min. The children called her Teacher Grace and followed her instructions with infectious enthusiasm. The mysterious bag contained homemade therapy materials, educational toys, and improvised equipment she had created with her own meager savings. Grace had dedicated not only her extra hours to Soo-min, but also her nights to other children who, like Emeka, had no access to expensive treatments. Jin-ho watched Grace help an 8-year-old boy take his first steps without support. The joy on the child's face and the pride shining in Grace's eyes created a lump in the crime boss's throat. At that moment, he realized he was not dealing with a simple housekeeper, but with someone who possessed a life purpose far greater than he had ever imagined. The next day, Jin-ho confronted Grace once more, but this time with a completely different approach. "Grace, I need to ask you a question, and I want an honest answer," Jin-ho said. finding her in the kitchen. "Why have you never told me about your work at the community center?" Grace stopped wiping the counter, her hands trembling slightly. "Mr. Kang, I can explain." "No need to explain. I need you to answer me. Do you have official qualifications in physical therapy?" Grace sighed deeply, as if preparing for a confession she had been holding back for a long time. "Yes, sir. I graduated in physiotherapy 4 years ago from the University of Lagos. I studied on a scholarship while working nights to support myself in Emeka." The revelation crashed over Jin-ho like a tidal wave. "You're a trained physical therapist. And you're working as a housekeeper. Why?" "Because no one in Seoul hires a black African therapist without clinical experience in Korean hospitals," Grace replied with a mixture of sadness and resignation. "I sent applications to dozens of clinics, hospitals, rehabilitation centers. The answer was always the same: lack of relevant local experience. Sometimes they didn't even bother with an excuse." Jin-ho felt a stab of shame, recognizing his own contribution to such exclusionary systems. How many times had he hired professionals based solely on appearances and recommendations from people in his own circles? "So you accepted work here as a maid, knowing you could be practicing your profession?" "I needed the job, sir. And when I saw Soo-min, I thought perhaps I could help quietly, without anyone knowing." Grace paused. "I didn't imagine I would be discovered." At that moment, Soo-min appeared in the kitchen, walking without crutches for the first time in her life. Her steps were careful, but firm. The girl went directly to Grace and hugged her tightly. "Auntie Grace, I walked here all by myself, just like you said I would." Jin-ho froze. His daughter had just walked independently for the first time, and this historic achievement had happened thanks to someone he had treated with suspicion and disdain for months. Grace knelt to be at Soo-min's level. "I knew you could do it, little warrior. You are the bravest girl I know." Soo-min turned to her father, her eyes shining with pride. "Appa, did you see? I walked by myself. Auntie Grace taught me I can do anything if I really believe." Jin-ho approached his daughter, knelt down and embraced her with an intensity he hadn't shown in years. Tears streamed down his face as he held Soo-min, feeling the strength in her small legs that had once seemed so fragile. "I'm sorry, my daughter," Jin-ho whispered. "I'm sorry for not believing in you the way Grace did." Grace watched the emotional scene but began to step away discreetly. "Grace, wait!" Jin-ho called out. "Don't leave." She stopped, turning with tear-filled eyes. "I owe you an apology. Many apologies," Jin-ho continued, still holding Soo-min. "You gave my daughter back to me, and I treated you as though you were nothing. You are far more than I deserve to have in my home, and now I need to find a way to make amends for all the injustice I committed." 3 months later, Grace could hardly believe the transformation her life had undergone. Jin-ho had not only officially promoted her to Soo-min's private physical therapist with a salary 5 times higher, but he had also invested heavily in a complete renovation of the Sarang Community Rehabilitation Center. The once improvised space was now a modern, fully equipped clinic where Grace provided free care to all the children in the district. Jin-ho had hired a multidisciplinary team to work under Grace's supervision. 2 additional therapists, a child psychologist, and an occupational therapist. But the changes didn't stop there. Jin-ho began working reduced hours, dedicating entire afternoons to monitoring Soo-min's progress. For the first time in years, father and daughter developed a genuine connection, playing together, laughing together, dreaming together. Hee-jin, who had initially been uncertain about the drastic changes in the family dynamic, had become Grace's greatest advocate. The 2 women had grown close, and Hee-jin frequently accompanied Grace to the community center, volunteering with the children. Soo-min, in turn, had become a small celebrity at her international school. Not only could she walk normally, but she also participated in adaptive dance and engaged enthusiastically in all activities. More importantly, she had developed unshakable confidence and an extraordinary sense of empathy for her age. One special afternoon, Soo-min asked to give a presentation at school about her recovery journey. Jin-ho and Hye-jin sat in the audience as their daughter walked onto the stage firmly, without any assistance. "My name is Soo-min Kang," the girl began, her voice clear and confident. "A year ago, I used crutches and thought I would never be able to do the things other kids do. Today, I want to tell you how I learned that limitations exist only in our minds." Soo-min told her story simply but powerfully. She spoke about the difficult days, the sadness she felt, and how Grace came into her life like an angel disguised as a housekeeper. She explained how Grace taught her that every small step forward was a victory, and that giving up should never be an option. "Auntie Grace taught me that it doesn't matter where you come from or what you look like," Soo-min said, searching for Grace in the audience. "What matters is the size of your heart and your willingness to help others. Today, I walk, I run, I dance, I have friends, but most importantly, I learned to believe in myself. The audience erupted in emotional applause. Jinho felt a pride unlike anything he had ever experienced, not just pride for his daughter, but also for having found the humility to recognize his mistakes and the wisdom to value Grace. After the presentation, Grace approached Sumin with tears streaming down her cheeks. "You were incredible, little warrior. I am so proud of you." "Auntie Grace, I have a surprise," Sumin said, taking an envelope from Jinho's hands. "Appa helped me prepare this for you." Grace opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was an official document, a full scholarship for a specialization in pediatric physical therapy at Yonsei University, one of Korea's most prestigious institutions, along with a partnership contract for the newly renamed clinic, the Grace and Amika Institute for Children's Therapy. "I can't accept this," Grace murmured, overwhelmed. "You can, and you will," said Jinho, stepping forward. "This isn't charity, Grace. It's justice. It's recognition for everything you've done for my family and for dozens of other families in this city." Yejin joined them, taking Grace's hands in hers. "You're no longer our employee, Grace. You're our family, and family takes care of each other." Emeka, who had been invited to the presentation, embraced his sister proudly. "Grace, you always told me I could achieve anything. Now it's your turn to believe in the impossible." 2 years later, the Grace and Amika Institute had become a nationally recognized center for pediatric rehabilitation. Grace had completed her specialization with honors and treated children from across South Korea. Her approach, which combined scientific techniques with genuine love and creativity, revolutionized traditional concepts of therapy. Sumin, now 8 years old, had become the Institute's junior ambassador, visiting schools across Seoul to speak about inclusion and overcoming obstacles. Her friendship with Grace remained unbreakable, and she considered Grace her second mother. Jinho had learned the most important lesson of his life. The true value of a person is not measured by diplomas, wealth, or social status, but by the capacity to transform lives through love and dedication. Grace had arrived at his home as a housekeeper, but revealed herself to be an angel in disguise, sent to teach that miracles happen when we least expect them, through the hands of those we often overlook. The Kang family's story became a powerful reminder that sometimes we must lose our certainties to discover deeper truths, and that life's greatest treasures often come wrapped in the simplicity of those who dedicate themselves to serving others with unconditional love. If this story touched your heart, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell so you never miss another one. Drop a comment and let me know what you thought. Until next time, family. Claude é uma IA e pode cometer erros. Por favor, verifique as respostas.